Hello, Texas history students. This is Coach Christian. Some of you that are seeing this today are in Coach Willis's class, so don't be afraid of that or don't be alarmed that you're in the wrong spot. Coach Willis and I are sharing, if you will, the presentation of some of our slides to each other's classes, so don't be worried about that. When we talk about this in this unit, we're talking about regions and rivers in Texas and where peoples lived. And when we say peoples, we're talking about the early peoples, the Native Americans, and we just call today, we refer to them as the Indians. And where did they live? Well, all human beings establish settlements along waterways. And so when we talk about, as the question on the slide asks you, what factor determines the location of most Texas cities? Well, obviously it's water. And so on this slide here, you'll see that there is the squiggly lines within Texas are rivers. And we're going to do some exercises where you're going to identify those rivers. Many of you have been on Texas rivers for enjoyment. So in this map, we see that we have New Mexico on the left and Oklahoma on top, and Arkansas, AK, and Louisiana, LA, and all the blue squiggly lines are rivers, and they're identified. One thing I just want to share with you, when you think about rivers in the United States of America, and in particular in Texas, is that all of the rivers, and if, as you're looking at me, if say this is a mountain right here, say this is a mountain and say that's the Rocky Mountains, and as you're looking at that, on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains, which would mean all of the cities and states that are east of Colorado, let's put it that way, like Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, and so on. All of those states, all the rivers in those states, they all drain into the Mississippi River. And then all the rivers on the western side, on the California side of the Rocky Mountains, on the left, if you will, all those rivers drain into the Pacific Ocean. And because the rivers are coming off the mountains, and they drain accordingly. One thing that's unique about Texas is if you look at the map, all of the Texas rivers, with the exception of two rivers, drain into the Gulf of Mexico. So the Canadian River, you'll see that across the top of Texas, it drains into the Mississippi. The Red River, it drains into the Mississippi as well. All the other rivers in the state of Texas drain into the Gulf of Mexico. And that's something that's a little bit different as you look at the map and just understand the topography and the geography of North America and how all of that works. The Rio Grande and Red River form the northern and southern boundaries of Texas. They're natural borders. And if you'll look at a lot of maps, sometimes in other places, rivers also distinguish borders between states and even countries because they're a natural barrier. And that is, even in what we call a geopolitical sense, become natural barriers between peoples, sort of like a fence. So the northern and southern borders of Texas are the Red River in the north and the Rio Grande River in the south. Now, the Rio Grande River begins up in the mountains of Colorado. Labeling Texas rivers. So you're going to you'll have these maps to work from, and you'll have one that has the rivers on it, and then you'll have to transfer them to the map where the names are not. And then you'll notice even on this map the location of cities along the rivers. Southernmost river besides the Rio Grande is the Nueces River, and you're going to learn about this a lot more later on in the school year when we get into the establishment of Texas and the disputes that Texas as a nation state when we were the Republic of Texas, and even as we became a state in the United States, there was a dispute between Mexico, the nation of Mexico, and Texas as to what the southern border should be. Mexico, of course, they wanted it to be the Nueces River, and the United States and Texas claimed that the Rio Grande was the border. Now, notice the Rio Grande is 315 miles long. I'm sorry, the Nueces River is 315 miles long, and maybe some of you have been to that up in the Texas Hill Country over by a town called Barksdale in Camp Wood, north of Uvalde. The Guadalupe and Colorado Rivers. Colorado River runs directly through Austin, so if you go to Austin and you go north into Austin, into town, you will cross the Colorado River. And then the Guadalupe starts over there in the Hunt area near north of Ingram and Kerrville, and it goes all the way to the coast as well. Last year, two springs ago now, a young man by the name of Ethan West paddled a kayak from the beginnings, what is called the headwaters of the Llano River, all the way to Matagorda Bay on the Gulf Coast. The Llano River, and you know where that is, it goes through Llano. It eventually connects to the Colorado River, which goes down to the Matagorda Bay and the Gulf of Mexico. And a young man paddled that in a kayak the entire way. He came and talked to our classes about that. Two other important rivers moving up kind of in the central and northern Texas areas is Brazos, and there's a fantastic book called Goodbye to a River. And the Brazos River is very long, and of course Brazos is arms, and at its beginnings there are several branches of the Brazos River, and they all dump into a main channel that becomes the waterway that goes again all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. The Neches, and you've heard maybe of a town called Port Neches, and of course Port Neches is on the Neches River, and that's up in East Texas, and again it dumps into the Gulf of Mexico as well. So there's just an overview of some of the major rivers in Texas. And I just want to point out to you again on this map right here, you'll see all of these rivers. And some people, they kind of make a little game for themselves where they try to get on each river. And just to say that I've been on those rivers. And of course, there's smaller rivers that do not appear on this map, like over near between the Nueces River and the Pecos Rivers, there's a river called the Devil's River, and it is absolutely beautiful if you ever get a chance to go there and see that. And then there's, just like our own river right here in town, the Pedernales, and it doesn't appear on the map. So there's a lot of other rivers that are not on the map, but it is the life of Texas revolves around water, and as it does in many other places. So it's something to feel good about and to be proud of, but it's something also to know, and that all of our rivers run from the northwest to the southeast, and all of the rivers in Texas, with the exception of two, the Canadian and the Red, they all dump into the Gulf of Mexico. The Canadian Red dump into the Mississippi River.